Canadian English has an that is relatively central, relatively back from the pronunciation of in a lot of other varieties. You can hear this perhaps in my speech, but for sure in the word faction as pronounced by a police chief in Ottawa.
In hindsight, what would you have done differently in this planning phase?
I suppose we would have given more credibility to the information and intelligence telling us that there was a faction that were planning on staying for a much longer period of time.
And because Canadian is relatively back and is relatively front for at least some speakers in Western New England, probably speakers from, say, the Connecticut area is relatively front. Canadian cat can be close to a Western New England cot. And I have an anecdote about this that I did mention in an earlier lecture where I said the word cat and my prospective landlord wondered why I was telling him that I had a cot I was going to sleep on rather than a bed. So the Canadian is generally thought to have shifted to occupy the space that was opened up when awe merged with awe. And so again, this is an example of a pull chain where the moves down here, and then in this diagram we have moving down to where is, moving down to where is. This is from a 1995 paper. It's pretty clear that the is centralized in Canadian English, but it's more controversial about what the rest of the changes actually are. We have some fantastic data on this now from a study that just came out this year. And in this study, I'm going to make this a little smaller so you can see the whole table in your screen. So here's moving down. How do we know it's moving down? Well, we have data from older speakers and younger speakers. The older speakers had it relatively front and high, and the younger speakers, it's retracting and lowering. And we do see that for these younger speakers as well, is lowering and retracting, and is lowering and retracting too. But maybe not quite as much as that first diagram that we saw, which had lowering pretty much all the way to where was. Okay, now we can talk about Western Massachusetts. Again, a very recent study, this time from 2021. The data were collected in 2019 from speakers in Greenfield and Springfield. Take a look especially at the changes in bat. So bat is the key word that's being used here for the a vowel. In this paper, they're using ban as the key word for the a before nasal. And you can see this is a speaker who was born, this is a set of speakers who were born in the 1930s. And they have this distinction between ban and bat in terms of the height and frontness of the a. They also have a distinction between marry and Mary. So the one word is pronounced with an a vowel, and the other words are pronounced with something more like an e vowel. Even though the in this variety is down here. Compare that one, this chart. So the other thing I should mention is that thought and lot are distinct for these speakers from the 30s. Here are speakers from born in the 2000s. Mary are all together. Bat has centralized. Dresses come down a bit too. And we have the no longer any distinction between thought and lot. This brings us to the project that we did in Ling 370 in fall 2022. We mapped the vowels of a Northampton resident born in Holyoke in 1955. His name is Bill Dwight, and we got samples of his speech from a podcast that had been archived on the net. The plot I'm showing you now was done by Emily Miller, one of the students in that class. And what you'll see is that Bill Dwight has bat relatively low. Now remember from the oldest speakers, the bat was quite high, even perhaps higher than the dress vowel. And here it's relatively low and central, but he's still got the lot-thought contrast. So these labels are showing you the mean values for the vowels, and you can see the spread of each of the colors around them. So his age is in between the youngest and the oldest speakers from that Nesbitt and Stanford study, and his vowel system is right in between them too. You can make this out here that this is Mary, and he's got a good contrast between that and Mary and Mary. Again, this is probably something more like the older speakers than like the younger speakers. We'll talk about the methodology that we used last year to generate this plot, to analyze the data and get to this plot, and we'll be replicating it with other speakers from Western Mass. We'll finish this video with a little sample of Bill Dwight's speech. Here you can see a picture of him, and you can see that in the title of this article that he was referred to as the Spirit of Northampton. And I think that he really does kind of sound like he's from here.
And, it's interesting because a lot of people who are complaining about the new things or the new people or the people you see downtown now were the new people 30 years ago, and people were complaining about them. And now it's come full circle, and people lose sight of that context. They just don't know. We've transitioned into the curmudgeons, the cranks and the grouches.